And welcome back, everybody. Runway Life, the podcast for everyone in aviation. Andrew, third episode back. I appreciate it. We appreciate it.
Still here. Glad to be here.
I'm sure our watchers and listeners will be happy to hear about this particular episode.
This is the episode I've been looking forward to the most, honestly.
Yep.
This is the one that...
This one's going to be 1,500 hours the first day at an airline. And I cannot wait to unpack this. But before that, what would you say your hardest type rating was out of the... Because you've got two now, right? You've got the...
I've got two. I've got the 737 and the CRJ.
Okay. So which one of those would you say was the hardest?
Oh, CRJ.
Is that based on the fact that that was your first one anyway?
Oh yeah. It was
so
my
you're drinking
first,
from the
It was my
fire hose.
first type rating program.
Okay.
So that was, yeah.
So it's a challenge. It's a lot to learn. Mainly systems.
It's not so much about... It's not so much about what to learn. It's about how you learn. It's about it's just about being in a different environment. It's the first time you're in an airline, first time going through an airline's training program. Nobody's told you what to expect, and we'll get more into this. But the way it's presented to you, you're given all the tools to succeed, but maybe you're not given. You're given all the tools to succeed, but maybe you're not handy with the hammer.
Okay. So you're not quite swinging the hammer the correct way yet, but you will do.
You will.
And then the other one that I want to ask is, what is your favorite approach that you have flown? And I don't mind whether that's in GA or professional.
Our favorite approach that I have flown, hands down, is the DCA Runway 15. Yeah, DCA Runway 19 River Visual.
Okay.
Yeah, that the CRJ couldn't do an RNP approach. We couldn't fly an approach that was coupled to GPS, and so there's an approach going into DC's National Airport that follows the Potomac, and it's a completely visual approach, and you're quite literally hand flying as you descend down over the Potomac with like the White House just off your left wing.
Okay,
and like passing the National Mall.
You already got buy-in from me on that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful awesome. Approach. It's a great experience, and it makes you feel like a real pilot.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so 1,500 hours.
1,500 hours.
First day at the airline.
You've done it.
Hit me.
You've hit the 1,500 hours. You've got the job offer. You're walking into new hire training, and this is. It's really easy to talk about the ab initio, just starting 0 to 250, the time building, what those experiences are like. What nobody really talks about is what happens after you get the letter. And you can go kind of dig through the interwebs to find out some information.
So the letter being CJO, right?
The conditional job offer. Yeah,
okay.
you can go through the internet to try and find that. There's not much good information out there on the whole experience.
Okay.
So my first regional airline, the only regional airline I went to was PSA. And it's a great place. I met a lot of great people. The CRJ was a great airplane to fly. Had a really fun experience there. Got hit by COVID. Had a not so fun experience there. But overall, my time at PSA was mostly positive. What nobody is going to tell you is that as soon as you walk in this door, the way you're going to learn is going to be very fast-paced. It is drinking from the fire hose. And if you've not done an airline training program before, this can be quite intimidating because it's nothing like the kind of training you're going to do at your flight school or even at a 135. It's a wild departure, right? So you walk in the door to your airline's training facility. They're going to fly you to wherever the training facility is. They'll put you up in a hotel. Mm-hmm. They'll provide transportation to and from the hotel to the training facility. Some airlines, like JetBlue, actually have like a nice all-in-one campus. I know American's building one as well,
right? Where
their hotel and their simulators are on the same property. So you just kind of walk across the thing of your training facility. In my case, it was Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
And if you want to know what's good about Dayton, Ohio, I will tell you that they have a lovely river to kayak, and that's about it. Okay. You walk into the training facility in your airline, and you sit down in this big classroom, and your first week and a half is usually all the nitty gritty paperwork, right? So you're going to go over pay rates, schedules, setting up direct deposit, enrolling for your benefits. The union's going to come in and talk to you a little bit. They'll distribute your iPad or EFB, whichever you're using. Some airlines don't use iPads. They'll distribute your EFB to you, get you set up with all the corporate applications and logins that you need. The first week is all the soft HR stuff.
Right.
And then at some point at the end of that first week, and it was the same at my airline that I'm currently at, you're going to have a systems test.
Okay.
And you're not going to have studied for systems at all in class, right? So when I'm saying that you're going to have to like reconfigure how you train, this is where it starts to kick in. Right. Before you move on to the next step, you're going to take a written on systems. And it's usually pretty basic. It's rote information. It's that low level, like you either know it or you don't. It's all in the book. It's all printed for you. And usually there's a lot of like flashcards you can find online from people who have come through before. I'm trying to remember the app that Quizlet. Quizlet has like, if you spend any time on Quizlet, there's study card decks for every airplane imaginable out there from every airline. So you'll take a test. Usually this covers limitations in systems, some of the groundwork. And then you're going to go into an initial fleet training program, which is usually a day or two long.
Okay.
This program is just an introduction to your airplane. It's an overall, you've been awarded an airplane out of new hire. Some regionals fly multiple types, some don't. In the case of PSA, we didn't fly multiple airplanes, so you were going to be on the CRJ. Congratulations, welcome to the CRJ. Okay. We didn't have introduction to fleet because it was baked into systems. But some regionals will have a separate class that introduces you to your fleet. And then you go straight into the systems. And then you're usually in systems class for 2 weeks, 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the airline and the nature of your airplane. This is where you get more in depth in systems. You start talking about, instead of just the basic rote level information, you start getting into how many hydraulic systems, and do you have PTUs, power transfer units, and are your flaps electric or hydraulic or both? Do you have fly-by-wire or flight control augmentation? How does your stab trim work? How do the avionics work? Where does all the data come from? How does the data get from the pitot probe to the computers that adjust stab trim automatically? And how does, like, all of this stuff, like everything you need to know. Airline pilots, we know a lot about our airplane. In the old days, we used to say that you had to build the airplane, right? You had to be able to basically build it.
Right.
Nowadays, it's not quite that intense, but they still want you to know a good solid chunk of information about your airplane.
Right.
You'll go and take an oral at some point after that, which is going to cover a more broad set, not just of systems. You'll talk about the systems you just learned, but you'll also kind of talk about rules that are governed by the flight operations manual that your airline has, right? Because the rules of the airline are sometimes different than the rules of the airplane, right? More expansive. So like the airplane could be qualified to fly a Category 3 autoland, but your airline might not be. Or your airline might have rules governing how you're allowed to fly a Category 3, what weather conditions, what runway equipment. So you'll have an oral that usually covers all of that, kind of in one. Again, this is generalized for most AQP programs, but not every airline does it this way. This is just kind of like a general overview of the experiences I've had and I've heard. Right. And then after that, you pass that oral, and now you're in systems phase. Or sorry, you've left systems phase. You're now in simulator training. So now this is the fun part. This is where you actually go and you begin to fly the box, as we call it. You fly the big box. And boy, is that something. I can't fly the box. I'm just going to say it. I feel like I can fly the airplane pretty stellar. I can't fly the box for anything, right? It's such an unnerving experience in that thing because it's supposed to feel like the airplane, and it feels nothing like the airplane. It really doesn't. I would,
obviously we said it in the last one. The one of the sims that I flew was the 650, and I mean, obviously I don't have any real world because nobody's let me fly a 650 for obvious reasons.
We should change that.
Yeah, we should.
If you have a 650, you should reach out to him.
Yeah, give me a call. I'd love to get in that. But it was very, very interesting. Just it was a very surreal moment to suddenly jump into something that literally has everything that the cockpit has. Every single thing that's in a real 650 was available to me in that cockpit,
And
which was
studied,
shocking.
Yeah, you've studied for it. You've been given what we affectionately call paper tigers, which are these kinds of things.
Yep.
So you go through your flows and the moves that your hands are going to do, and you come up with the mnemonic devices for how your flows work, and you sit down expecting all of this, and then you sit in the actual simulator and none of it makes sense all of a sudden. Like you've done it 1,000 times on paper, and now you're in the actual thing and you can't figure it out. And for me, the most disorienting thing about it, our former employer had an attraction that was based on this technology.
Right.
If you remember, I can ride that fine, and it's one of my favorites. I love that thing. It's,
Right.
you know, I'm a nerd of that particular IP, so I love that thing. Can't fly the box because of that Fresnel lens.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yep. Okay.
There's this weird lens between the projection screen and you that's supposed to make it look 3D without being 3D, and in reality, it just makes everything look swimmy and weird and fishy. It's very awkward.
Now that you just said that, I am actually thinking, yeah, no, that was definitely the case.
Yeah.
When I did the 650, and I
Yeah.
never thought of it. Now, yeah, definitely the Fresnel lens. Yep.
It took me a couple tries in the box to figure out why. I was getting sick. I was getting motion sick, and
Yep.
I don't get motion sick in the plane, and I don't get motion sick on
Yep.
on a Star Speeder, but I got motion sick
Mm-hmm.
on. I get motion sick every time I go to recurrent. I have to take some Dramamine. It's not
Yep.
fun. You're going to go through some maneuvers training. So you'll go through an actual set of single engine cuts, V1 cuts. You'll do basic ILSs. You'll do a single engine ILS in actual to land,
Right.
actual in the box. You'll go through all of the oh crap what ifs in the box, and you'll actually fly those in the box.
And you're set up with a captain and first officer role, correct? For that, or is that all solo?
It depends on the airline.
Okay.
It really depends on the airline. So it might be you and a new hire, and you're just switching seats, in which case you kind of have to know the captain's role too. You're not graded on that, but you kind of
Right.
have to.
You have to at least play the
Play the
role.
part.
Right.
Or some airlines will do, like what my current airline does, is they'll usually pair you with somebody who's either going through recurrent or somebody who needs upgrade training.
Okay.
And so you wind up in a scenario where they're qualified or qualifying for the captain's seat.
So they're doing a 2-for-1, basically. One's upgrading and one's
New hire.
new hire and getting their initial training. So that's
Yeah,
that's good. That's
we've-
good.
We've had that, and the good thing about that is that if you get that scenario, the person in the left seat knows and has gone through this several times, and so they're aware of what's about to happen. They're aware of what needs to happen.
And
Kinda,
you're potentially getting your first introduction to real teamwork inside the cockpit as well.
it's so yeah. The CRM in those scenarios, crew resource management, is so much more improved
Yeah.
because they know you're new.
Yeah.
They know what's coming. They've been through it. They've been trained on it, and they've requalified on it several times. And so they're able to just kind of like pick that out and help you through it a little
Yeah,
bit more.
that sounds amazing.
In the instance of my regional, that was not the case. We had seat partners. We didn't have seat support. So I was paired with another new hire.
Okay.
Really awesome guy. His name is also Craig. Really great guy. And that's how we did it. After 2 hours, we would just switch seats, and now he would do the new hire FO stuff, and I would play mock captain.
Okay.
And so you're going to do the maneuvers, and then you're going to do a maneuvers validation, which just basically is a non-jeopardy check ride. It's weird. Most things at the airlines these days, if you're doing an AQP, Advanced Qualification Program, if you're doing an AQP training program, if your airline has that, the only jeopardy event typically is the last one. In other words, the only IACRA recorded event
Okay.
is the last one. Now, your individual pilot record, your PREA record within that airline will contain any training issues you've had. So if you do make a mistake and you wind up having to go for additional training before you get to the check ride, if you will,
Right.
when you go to your next airline, they will see that, but it's not recorded to the FAA,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's kind of like it's a pencil written note rather than a big bold ink written note.
It's a report card versus a transcript.
Okay. Yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah. And then you'll go through the check ride, and then once you're done, you have a type rating, and you're done with the schoolhouse. Yay, you're a pilot.
How long does that normally take? 8 to 16-ish kind of weeks?
That process is usually about 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the
Okay.
airline simulator availability and the unique structure of their training program and their training footprint.
Okay.
But then comes the next bit. So you've just walked in the door and you're at the regional now. And now you're going to go fly real passengers. You just got your certificate. Now you're released to something called IOE, Initial Operating Experience. It
Okay.
might also just be called Operating Experience, OE. Depends on the airline. This is where, for the very first time, you're going to go fly paying passengers. And there's going to be a check airman or a specially qualified training captain in the left seat. You're not flying with just a regular captain. You're going to go through some time, again, dependent on the airline and their AQP program. Depends on how much time you're going to have with a check airman. But you'll do a couple trips with this person who's also going to continue to coach you and train you. And once that's done, you're released to the line. You're fully qualified. You're fully trained. They'll see you back in the training department in 9 months to a year for requalification. And now you get to go join the rank and file of your airline. Sounds like a lot because it is.
Yeah. It definitely does sound quite like a lot. So,
According to that timer, that took like 10 minutes.
so once you're off, that entire process is what, somewhere in the region. That's around the 8 to 16 week type of marker ish.
Yeah, IOE is the real time suck, if I can say that, because it's dependent on your training department being able to pair you with a check airman, on there
Okay.
being a check airman available for you to go fly with.
And from there, then now you're rolling into, what are you going into next? Now you're going to be on reserve.
Yeah, so typically what happens after you're released out of training is you go to this thing called reserve. And you can think of reserve as crew scheduling. It's the airline and crew scheduling's oh crap bucket.
Okay.
Right? It's basically used to cover trips that they couldn't assign to pilots before that just never got picked up out of open time, or there's a weather event that's disrupting schedules and they need to recover the operation. They're going to start reaching into that bucket and start pulling reserve pilots out of it to keep what they can keep going.
Right.
And that's basically how that works.
How long did you spend on or on reserve?
I spent a little bit longer on reserve than most people.
Well, there was a lot going on at that particular time as well, right?
Yeah,
So-
but this is where is where the conversation no longer is so much about reserve and it starts getting into seniority.
Right. Okay.
Airlines are very seniority driven. And what I mean by that is if you've never worked in a union role before, on your new hire date in your class, based on your birth date, right, they collate you in your class into seniority, 1 through however many people are in your class. In my case, it was 25, so 1 through 25. And based on how old you are, you're slotted into a seniority place inside of there in your class. That class is then taken and amended to a master seniority list of every single pilot that's on property, right? So you're the bottom 25 out of all of those pilots.
Right.
And it really depends on how fast you move up that seniority list based on attrition. This could be retirements or pilots leaving for another airline.
Right.
And it could also be whether the airline opens another base or closes a base, right? Your seniority on that list will stay the same, but your ability to get a solid schedule and be off reserve will change.
Right.
So your place in that seniority list will change,
Right.
but it will also be dependent upon what you want. So in my instance, I could have held the line a lot sooner than I did, but I had family in Knoxville. And I knew by choosing to stay in Knoxville as my base, I would be on reserve much longer than if I went to a junior base like Philly or DC.
Right.
I chose to stay in Knoxville because I valued spending time with my family more than I valued holding the line.
When you didn't really want to end up on a crash pad, right?
Right, but there were ways around that, commuting policies, hotel allowances. For me, it was mostly about spending time with families.
Right,
Although,
okay.
if you, when he says a crash pad, Craig's referring to if you work for an airline and you live someplace that you're not based in. So we live in Orlando. PSA
Right.
doesn't have an Orlando base. So let's say at the time I couldn't get Knoxville, I was stuck in Charlotte on reserve. I'd have to make myself available in Charlotte to the company for 5 days on short call reserve.
Right.
I can't afford a hotel for that. That's almost $100 a night, even at a cheap hotel with tax. And so instead, what pilots have is we have these things called crash pads, which are usually dormitories, apartments with bunk beds. I had one with my current airline when I first started up in Newark. This was in a hotel where the hotel room had like 8 bunk beds in there. It was really cramped. And
Yeah.
but it's a place where you have a bed and a roof so that if you wind up not flying or if your schedule is they're going to use you today but bring you back and use you the next day and bring you back, they're not going to provide you a hotel for that. You're based in that city. It's your responsibility to have accommodation in that city. And a crash pad is a cheap, uncomfortable but cheap way to do that.
I mean, 8 other people or 7 other people in there, though, Now, depending on their sleeping habits and...
There were never that many there.
Okay.
Usually.
So maybe a couple, a few,
Yeah.
either way. That's it's one of those, if you can make it work, fortunately, touch wood, if I ever end up in the situation where I'm up in Newark, I've got some family that live over in Milltown, which is like a 25-30 minute drive. So I think I will be trying to see if I can sneak into that basement.
Yeah, and what I will say is it's an uncomfortable situation to be in, but in your case, there's a couple of pieces of advice I'd give you. Number one is never move for a regional, right? You've got kids that are going to school. Your wife has friends and established and work and everything down here. It's really easy to say the commuting is awful.
Yeah.
It is. I didn't know how bad it was because I spent most of my professional career so far commuting to PSA domiciles. And I always thought, well, it's not that bad because I spend this much time in the car if I were driving to my old job at my former employer. And so I'm really only doing this twice a week. And that time is the same time. It is bad. It's bad. It's very bad. I can't sell that short enough because it's your responsibility to be there, right? So weather events, schedule disruptions, there's commuting policies that can protect you. But overall, it's your job to be at work, right? Like you have to get to your domicile. So I would never move. I would rather commute if I have a family.
Yeah. I will not be moving. That's I don't have an option in that. My wife would not be. That we're staying put.
Yeah.
Orlando is our place and home. So, speaking of which, I mean everything. You could kind of say you've had to take a slice of the crap pie to a certain extent for a few years to then end up at the place that you really wanted to be, which is the Orlando. Right. You hold a line with your airline out of Orlando.
Correct.
So how much, put that in perspective for anybody that's listening, out of your year, how much of your time is probably spent at your home airport, your base?
Do you mean like how much am I physically home now?
Physically home, but let's go with physically home.
Again, it's my choice, but it's getting better. I usually have 16 to 14 days off a month, depending on how I want to play my month now.
Okay.
Because I'm not commuting, that means that all my days off are 100% mine.
Right.
It used to be when I was commuting to Newark, there were times where I would have to leave the day before because my trip maybe started at 7 a.m. and there was no way to get there in time. Or maybe I got back to Newark at 11 o'clock at night and there was no flight to Orlando, so I didn't get home until the next morning.
And you've fallen into the jump seat standby
all the time.
Dance,
that's how you travel, and sometimes you don't make it. And particularly Newark for me, more often than not, I was commuting on other airlines.
Right.
Because there's just so many commuters for my airline out of Orlando to Newark because we have multiple fleets. Out of there, and I was forever having to look at Spirit or other ways home. I was forever having to look at other ways back to Orlando. But like a good example is the value of being home based. Well, tomorrow I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. I'll get in my car by 5:30. I'll park in the employee parking lot by about 6:15ish, and then I will leave at 7. I think it's 7:15.
Right.
I'll leave. I'll go up to Newark. Sorry, I'm going to Houston tomorrow. I'll go to Houston tomorrow, and then I will turn right back around. I'll come home, and I'll be home tomorrow by 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
And then you're off for the rest of the day.
And I'm off for the rest of the day. That's my day.
So you're home in time to go pick the kid up, make dinner, and you're good to go.
Well, yeah, my daughter doesn't have daycare tomorrow, but I will
Oh,
be
okay.
home. I will be home in time to take her to dance class.
Oh, well, there you go. That's,
So
I mean,
you
there's
know,
a quality of life thing, right?
which is why like I could being senior is so important because that's my choice now.
Yeah.
My choice is how I want to spend my time with seniority, and I'm very fortunate to be so young at my airline and
Yeah.
so senior. That's not terribly common, and I'm not blind to how blessed I am for that.
Right. And then closing out, what does the future look like? Are have you got the plans to go to captain slot eventually? 5-year, 10-year, 15-year plan?
Yeah, so that's the thing. Like I could go be a captain today. I
Right.
could be a captain on my airplane and probably hold it in my base today or in the next couple of months, somewhere in that time frame. Very little desire to.
Right.
Eventually I will, but with my daughter being so young and quality of life and time with her being so important to me, I would rather at this point continue to build my schedule, make it what I want. The moment I upgrade, I become junior relative to all the captains. Right now, I'm pretty senior relative to all the first officers.
Right. We're not going to get into the money side of it, but anybody that is looking to try to figure out what somebody does make at airlines, it's pretty open. I don't think it's hidden at all. Airline Pilot Central is a really good.
Sometimes out of date, don't always take it for granted. But when I started at the regionals, I was making about 50,000 a year.
Yep.
Now, for perspective, that's not a lot. It's also a lot. There are a lot of regional first officers, captains that I work with now who were once regional first officers who were on food stamps
Yes.
in their day. That was a thing.
And that money has obviously drastically changed inside the last few years as well, from when you first went into what it is nowadays.
Yeah, starting pay for a regional first officer kind of floats between 70 to 77.
Right. Actual money.
Annual.
Yeah.
Annual. And that's a minimum for first year. Pay rates do go up with longevity. So the longer you're with an airline, the more you get paid. And usually you'll see the biggest jump from year 1 to year 2. Your first year, you're a probationary pilot, so you have no union protection and you're getting paid pretty low. I got about a 50% pay increase
Okay.
going from year 1 to year 2 pay with my current airline.
And you can pretty much look at that one as being, it not only goes up inside of your years, but it also goes up depending on what type you're flying as well, correct?
Yeah, for
Marginally
for the
on some
regionals, not so much. But for the legacy carriers, yes. There is a pay band difference for your specific airframe. Yeah.
So the big piece of advice is choose wisely, I would say.
I'll say choose wisely, but in saying choose wisely, choose what's important to you. Choose if you're not married and you're young and you don't have kids and you are okay jumping on a 777 and being super junior and probably never flying, but getting paid minimum guarantee and going back to the training facility quite often to recertify because you're requalified because you're not
flying.
Yeah, so I actually have friends in Newark who are FOs on the Dreamliner, and that's exactly what they do. They hardly ever fly. I think they get one trip every 2 months or so.
Are they, what is that, APOs or something like that? What's that?
We call them bunkies.
Okay.
Relief officers, relief first officers. And they don't take off or land. They just kind of sit there and manage the aircraft, watch the fuel loads, make sure that the in-flight data is correct while the captain and the flying first officer are on rest.
So they're going to be flying the simulator a whole lot more than they're actually flying the plane.
Yeah, they probably about the same amount.
Okay.
Because your takeoffs and landings in 90 days. Like the weird thing is when you become an airline pilot, you have to abide by Part 121 and you have to abide by Part 91.
Okay.
Right? Like they're not exclusive, they are inclusive to each other. So your 3 takeoffs and landings in 90 days still applies in Part 121. And they don't meet that. But they're having a great life. They're getting paid pretty well to sit at home on reserve with a pretty good shot of not being used. And occasionally they have to go sit at the airport for airport standby. Yeah, but they're getting paid a lot of money to like eat good food in Manhattan and like just bum around New York City all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, everybody's got their own choice. The quality of life thing is what you and I are both screwed into, is what I would say. So,
I
okay.
wouldn't say screwed into. I
Well,
did it
no,
on my own accord.
screwed into more
Screw-
selected.
My wife did not screw me into having a family. I want to be that. Yeah.
No, my wife didn't either. I mean,
Sure,
more
Craig.
dialed
Sure.
into. Let's say
Sure.
dialed
Brandy?
into. Connected
Brandy.
to. Yeah, I'll get home now and get shot. Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So, well, I really want to say thank you very much for doing this this mini series, this little 3-episode banger, and let's see if we can get you back for some other episodes in the future.
I'd love to do a Q&A. So if you have questions about anything I didn't answer, being a pilot life, you guys have social channels, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Ask the question. Leave a comment. Likes if you liked it. Leave it alone if you didn't. Subs if you loved it.
Don't ask which airline it is because it won't be answered. Okay.
I think we answered it.
Yeah, we did in roundabout ways, but we're just not going to say the actual name.
Unfortunately, I think we answered it.
Yeah. We're just not going to say the name.
No.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Everyone, take care, stay safe, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you.